Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our 101st PAVE virtual panel discussion. My name is Tara Andringa, and I'm the Executive Director of PAVE. We are really excited for this conversation. We wanted to talk about an issue we haven't actually done a panel on so far. Obviously, those of us who grew up in cold weather climates know that drivers learn how to drive in the snow, and we wanted to ask about how do you teach or how do you program a vehicle to do the same thing? So we have two fantastic panelists from two organizations that have a lot of experience in this realm. Dave Tokic from Algolux and Tara Olds from the Minnesota Department of Transportation. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you, Tara.
We have, I think, the most audience questions we've ever gotten from a panel. So we have got a lot of interest in this topic and really excited to dig in. So I will go ahead and get started. Dave, first to you. I want to just start just really big picture and talk a little bit about both of your organizations. Can you give us a little bit of a background about Algolux and what your company does?
Sure. So Algolux is an AI software company focused on providing very robust and accurate perception stacks targeted at both ADAS driver assist systems as well as autonomous vehicles, and also a camera optimization tool. So basically squeezing the best performance out of cameras that you can get. And we're headquartered here in Montreal. I'm saying here because I'm actually based out of our Palo Alto office, but I'm here in Montreal in headquarters right now. And we have an office in Munich as well. And so very timely topic because with Montreal, we get a lot of harsh conditions, a lot of great snow, and maybe you can give Tara in Minnesota a run for the money on snowfall. So
probably a little bit more snow than in Palo Alto.
a little bit, yeah.
And Tara, we deal with a lot of states and really have huge respect for Minnesota and the work that you all are doing in the CAV space. Minnesota is really a leader. And so wanted to see if you could just give us a really broad overview of kind of Minnesota's approach to CAV technology and the work that you're doing there.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Tara. So yeah, Minnesota's CAV program has been around for several years now. We started really back in 2018. A lot of the work that we started was based on a governor's executive order under former Governor Dayton, as well as continued under Governor Walz, which it really formed our Governor's Advisory Council on CAV, which is 15 members of the state that really help give direction for what we can be doing to better prepare for future technologies, how Minnesota as a state can do that, but also as state agencies, what can we do and prepare for. We also established an interagency CAV team, and that brings together all of our state enterprise agencies to acknowledge that there's impacts from CAV to a number of different areas, not just the DOT. And then we also had the CAV office that I work for now that helps facilitate and organize a lot of the CAV work in the state. So we created also on top of that an innovation alliance. So that's focused on 5 different areas that can try to advance different efforts throughout the state, recognize issues, and just bring people together, recognizing that public, private, and academia can all really work together on this. It's not just a sole focus of the DOT. So a lot of opportunity for us to collaborate and work together.
Great. And also Minnesota is also part of the AV Pool Fund, which PAVE is working with to create a public-private partner forum. So working with you all there too. Dave, perception software is obviously really critical for all AV deployments, but want to ask what is unique about winter weather? Like how does winter weather make those functions more challenging?
Great question. So if we think about today perception, so these computer vision algorithms are mostly right now being done with AI, so deep learning based approaches. And there are a few challenges with harsh weather, with winter snow being really difficult. One of the issues is that snow can be perceived as like noise on a visual image, if you will, from a camera. And so that causes some really big challenges with the accuracy of perception from camera-based solutions. When it comes to LiDAR, which is another sensing modality, basically shoots out beams of laser pulses to basically be able to resolve around or in front of the vehicle, that tends to get diffused by the snow itself. So you're getting a much weaker signal return. And so these are a couple of really direct impacts from snow. Fog actually provides similar challenges as well. And so ultimately it results in lower accuracy in the perception and therefore less good data for that either autonomous vehicle or automated driving system to be able to act on.
Great. Yeah, we'll kind of keep digging into that a little bit more as the conversation goes
Sure.
on. Tara, Minnesota DOT has had a lot of AV deployments across the state. I'm curious if you can just kind of start by telling us some of the AV programs that you've had in Minnesota in the past and then those you have now.
Thanks, Sarah. So I'd say we don't necessarily have specific AV programs, as you might refer to them as, but
Deployments,
rather
sure.
areas of
Exactly.
emphasis, just to not get that confused. But a couple areas that I just like to highlight is one of the first and foremost is outreach and education. And with that, along with testing. So those are probably two of the highest priorities. Our Governor's Advisory Council really recognized that we have an opportunity to better inform people about what technology is, what it isn't, what it could be. And by doing that, we can hopefully talk to people to truly understand how transportation meets their needs today, but also how we can make sure it does tomorrow as well. We want to make sure that we can expose people to those technologies through demonstration projects like the Med City Mover, our White Bear Lake Bear Tracks project, as well as the Go Marty project in Grand Rapids. That really allows people to see where technology is and to, like I like to say too, understand its limitations. We all know it's not 100% automated yet, even though people might have misconceptions. And so it's a really good opportunity to just expose people. We also want to make sure we're doing that in a number of different areas around the state. So we have urban, suburban, and rural opportunities for that. With testing, we know that minimal testing has been done in winter weather. So as Dave mentioned, snow can be some fun challenges. And we know that we want to make sure that we're creating sustainable and reliable transportation options for folks. And so if there's anything we can do to help advance that, work with different technology companies, help with looking at different policies that can be put in place, we want to make sure that all people of all abilities can really benefit from these types of advancements. Another couple areas that we're really working on is safety. So looking at from a work zone perspective and our fleet opportunities, how can we advance worker safety, get people out of risky situations? So we have our autonomous truck mounted attenuator project that we're working on with a number of other states through the ATMA pooled fund. And we're also looking at a lane boundary guidance project of how we can ensure that our snowplow drivers know where to plow, where is the road at different times of the snowy blizzard conditions where you might not be able to see anything in front of you. We want to make sure we're keeping them safe as well as the other roadway users. And then one other one that I just like to highlight is what are the AV implications on roadways? So how do vehicles currently use our infrastructure? What might we want to be able to improve? What might be limitations? We're a state that has fiscal restraints. What are some of the things that we won't be able to do that technology maybe has to make changes for and things like that? And then lastly, the safety impact to all roadway users with AV technologies. A lot of focus has been on, are these vehicles causing crashes? Are they getting into crashes themselves? But not a lot of focus has been on what's happening to the environments around them. Are there other vehicles that are driving in different ways, causing more risky situations for other roadway users that maybe aren't being captured? So a lot of opportunity for us to continue making advancements.
For sure, that's fantastic. And then Dave, Algolux, I know, is a partner in a couple different groups, one in Europe and one in Toronto, and where you were selected as a perception partner. And these are designed to train self-driving cars to handle winter conditions, at least one in Toronto, I know. Curious, both of you can just describe both of those partnerships and what those groups are working on, and then also how you train a vehicle to drive in darkness and ice and snow.
Absolutely. So, we work with not only these, I would call it industry initiatives, but also with many automotive and AV companies. And to Tara's earlier point, safety is really the paramount piece here. There's lots of various statistics in terms of the number of roadway injuries and deaths. In the US, we've hit, I think, a 16-year high in roadway fatalities. So the trend is going in the wrong direction here in the US. And many of these involve either pedestrians or are in harsh conditions, low light, bad weather, things of that nature. And so these programs and the customer engagements we're working on really are trying to resolve what the industry calls corner cases, which I always find an interesting term because driving in the dark or in the snow or in the rain seems like a normal case to me, but they exhibit big challenges. And so there's a number of initiatives and approaches to addressing this. One, from our perspective as a perception provider, is how do you increase the robustness of the perception, which basically means, can the perception system accurately detect objects, free space that the vehicle can drive in, and things of that nature, not only in good conditions, such as well-lit conditions, et cetera, but obviously in these harsh snowy conditions, foggy conditions, rainy conditions, dark conditions. And so these initiatives are really about trying to raise the level and kind of come out with some breakthrough technologies to help us do that much better, so that we can expand and accelerate the ability for us to deploy more automated driving. That is, it is a difficult technical challenge. As I briefly mentioned before, there are various attributes to harsh conditions, be it snow, et cetera, that results in difficulty on the sensing side, difficulty on then the perception side. So sensing being the sensors themselves,
Right.
dealing with those conditions. Perception being, can I understand my surroundings? Do I know where that pedestrian is? How far that pedestrian is there, or that vehicle? And then do the proper localization and tracking. So how do I integrate in, say, mapping information and localization information, and then apply that from a prediction and planning standpoint, to be able to tell the vehicle, is it safe to make a lane change, or is there a hazard in the way, a pedestrian crossing the street that I need to brake for? This gets compounded tremendously due to poor weather. Snow is a great example. There's much different vehicle dynamics, obviously, in the snow, as we know as drivers, than it is on dry weather, dry roads. And so that has to be built into these prediction, planning, and control parts of the autonomous stack. The perception side of it is, you need to be able to see farther under these harsh conditions, because you need to be able to predict what to do further in the future.
Sure.
And so there's a lot of work being done on how do you see, how do you provide superhuman vision, if you will, to these vehicles to allow them to effectively operate under these difficult conditions. The practical reality is that while there's been great breakthroughs, and we're proud to say we've been part of those, is that I think there's a very pragmatic approach the industry is taking in terms of slowly being able to support those more challenging use cases. And in the industry, it's called an operational design domain. So one of them could be, I just operate on the highway and bright sunny skies and clear roads. The other is, it's dark, windy road in the middle of a snowstorm. That's maybe two ends of the spectrum of difficulty. And so the idea is to gradually increase these operational areas over time as the technology can get there. So there's still, quite a road to continue to drive on the technology front, but we are making some great breakthroughs. But ultimately, there's going to be a clear partnership with the technology providers and the industry, and also governments such as that Tara's representing, to do this in a safe manner that is also effective and useful for the communities.
Great. Yeah, that's part of the reason why we thought this conversation was so interesting, is so many of the deployments you see are in sunny, warm climates. And so kind of talking about some of these interesting places. And Tara, that brings us to, I wanted to talk about a couple of your deployments. One was the Med City Mover project, where you all tested low-speed multi-passenger shuttles in Rochester, Minnesota. And one of the goals was to test the vehicles in winter weather. Wanted to see if you could talk to us about what the challenges were, the biggest challenges that you saw there, and kind of how you overcome them. I loved the quote. I saw a news article where you were quoted saying one of the vehicles came to a stop because of snowflakes. And curious kind of how you addressed those things, and kind of talk about what Dave did in a real deployment scenario.
Yeah, definitely. So we definitely did experience vehicles coming to stops because of snowflakes, as well as other objects like leaves and blowing wind even captured as a hazard or an obstacle. So it was really interesting to understand where the algorithms and the software is today, how we could make advancements. So back in 2017, 2018, we've done some testing with Easy Mile off-road at our testing facilities that allowed us to really kind of understand some of the limitations with snow. They even had MnDOT employees come up, see the vehicles. And of course, it was a very snowy day and the vehicles were not able to function at all. So it was incredibly disappointing for some folks, but also was really helpful to understand we need advancements to make these things work. As Dave mentioned, these vehicles often are designed with what's the operating design domain. And we learned a lot by just talking with the manufacturers about what their ODD was. What are the temp limitations on it? Could they not go below a certain temp? And they argued that they said that their equipment wasn't tested to below a certain temperature, which Minnesota experiences colder than those temperatures.
Sure.
So we worked with them to kind of understand how we could push that. How could we test it further? This is a great opportunity. So working with our partners to understand where their current limits are and how we can start to, like as Dave said, stretch that, because we want to make these things more accessible and more valuable and reliable as they go. We also had some other opportunities to work with our partners where they were able to upgrade the software midway through the winter, which then we were able to see more filtering of some of these different things. So we maybe saw less impact to a light snow, but we still did see challenges getting through heavier snows or heavy rains. But we no longer were getting those obstacles like leaves as well that would be stopping us. One issue that came up this winter that was really, or last winter, I guess it would have been, that was really interesting, that kind of threw everybody for a loop that they hadn't experienced before, was seeing steam rise from manholes and that being captured as an obstacle. And so it really just shows that the operators that we had on board, we called them our onboard safety operators, were able to overtake and go into manual operation should these things occur, which they did. And they did, I'd say, a more frequent occurrence than a lot of the public expected them to. So that was an opportunity where we just had to make sure that people were educated that this is why we're testing them. It's not perfect. It's not 100% ready for everybody in mainstream as much as some of the public perception wanted them to be. And so it was twofold of one, understanding the limits, pushing the limits, educating people about where we're at, and understanding how we can keep moving those forward. On our White Bear Lake project that just started earlier this year, one of the things we've experienced already is even recognizing that different plowing takes place in different places. So on the roads, we might have plowing take place within 24 hours or sooner, but in parking lots, it might be a little different. And on that operation and that route, there's a few parking lots where they turn around, and it's very challenging for these lower clearance vehicles with not the largest tires to be able to get through some snow and slush. And so we're working to kind of understand how that can maybe impact routes or other things in the future as well. And then one last that I'll just note that isn't related to the winter weather as much, but it's the low speed of vehicles. So recognizing that these travel, 10 to 15 miles per hour for the shuttles, when that happens, it's very similar to what you might see like a bicyclist on the road. And what are the impacts when you have these mixed modes of transportation and different speeds? You get a little friction, you get some people that are maybe a little aggressive or a little impatient. And we saw other driving behaviors change significantly. And so we actually started a research project to look at that and understand, are there other things that we can capture and that we're missing to better assess the safety and the implications of putting these types of vehicles on the road.
Interesting.
I think maybe, if I may kind of rip a little bit on what Tara was saying, is that, as conditions get more difficult, that is where you find more and more of the unexpected. And it really, a lot of these processes, since these are AI-based autonomous stacks, they're data-driven. So being able to effectively capture data, not only in the easy conditions, which is the sunny days and so on, but also these harsh conditions. I love the example of the steam coming up during winter, which is just probably wouldn't have been expected by most companies. But there does need to be a very thoughtful exercise around data collection. But collecting data, you may capture things that you don't think of, but in a lot of cases, people are directing the data capture. So if they haven't thought of it, they may not get it. And so being able to do some continuous data collection, some active learning during that process, and also supplementing that, by simulation-based approaches and unsupervised learning, where there's a tremendous amount of advancements that are going on in these various tooling approaches to help come up with scenarios that aren't thought of, whether they're perception scenarios like the steam coming up or maneuvers on the road itself. And so the level of innovation that's going on isn't just around, hey, I've got a better sensor, or I've got a better way to detect that object. It's really this entire development flow kind of this ML ops type flow that allows us to capture and simulate and generate scenarios that you haven't thought of in a more effective way, so that you can do a better job of testing, better job of training, better job of testing, and a better job of deploying these systems. And those were just some fantastic examples, Tara. Yeah.
And Dave, actually, kind of on that note, we got a couple of questions, people asking kind of about the interaction between sensors and software. And how I understood the question is as a human, you kind of, it's snowing outside, so you get in the car and think it's snowing, so I'm going to, drive a little bit more slowly or leave more space between vehicles. Does a autonomous vehicle similarly recognize, okay, it's snowy, I need to look for black ice and drive more slowly? Like actually, is it programmed to drive differently in ice and snow, or is it just kind of, it always is looking for these obstacles?
I'll make my flip answer and say, I hope it does. Because you have to, right? You have to really adapt the way a vehicle drives depending on the conditions. And so, I can't speak about all the different approaches that are out there, but kind of with context for how we approach perception and how our customers are doing kind of more of that stack. I mean, we provide the perception side of it, but there's more to that stack than that, for the planning and control and so on. And so, yes, there's ways of actively informing the vehicle of conditions, whether it's through metadata that comes from weather.com or metadata that's sent out from the fleet management headquarters, et cetera. Two things that are from like what we do is we incorporate a lot of semantic information into our perception to understand the changes in the surroundings. From a perception standpoint, one great example is what is the drivable free space or road boundaries? That's a lot easier to do when there's nothing on the road and you can see the curbs or the road edge lines, et cetera. But what if it's covered in snow? And being able to semantically still understand the much different visual view, if you're using cameras, of that road surface, but still project that this is where it is, through the perception side, as well as through obviously mapping to tell you where things are. And so there's a lot of different approaches to dealing with that. But ultimately, they all have to coalesce together to inform the vehicle to take on a different driving persona based on the environmental conditions. That's a must for sure.
Great. And then Tara, you had kind of made reference to the White Bear Lake project, which was launched this year. And curious if they're, based on prior deployments, I keep calling them projects, but prior deployments that you all have teamed with other partners on, are there changes you made from earlier projects where you looked at winter weather to deal with this deployment differently in winter weather?
Yeah, so our MedCity Mover project in downtown Rochester, Minnesota wrapped up in August of this year and had a 12-month deployment, and we learned a lot. We also had two projects that kicked off this fall, the White Bear Lake Fair Tracks and then the Grand Rapids Go Marty projects, both very different than the MedCity Mover project. So White Bear Lake suburban in a less heavily trafficked route, going from one point to another with turnaround locations and parking lots rather than a circular route. And then MedCity Mover was downtown Rochester, mixed mode environment, all different types of people walking around, driving, bicyclists, stop signs, stoplights, and a lot of stuff happening. And then Grand Rapids is even different in the sense that it's in a downtown rural environment, and using different technology as well. So some are more LiDAR and sensor based, and some have more cameras. So we're working with all the different technologies to just, I'd say, gather a lot of data, share the lessons learned, and understand where we're at there. But when it comes to actually deploying the projects, one of the biggest things I think that we've been able to learn is just making sure that we continue to share information with the communities, share information why we're doing it, what we're hoping to learn, when we want to hear from them, and how we can incorporate their feedback, help them understand how this is part of a larger picture. It's not just we're putting this in and it's going to work and it's going to be great and we're going to move out, or we're going to move out after 12 months and you're never going to see us again. It might feel like that at times, but it's part of a bigger picture. Like Dave said, like some of this stuff's going to take some time for people to really realize to the fullest extent. So we want to make sure that we're able to address those misconceptions, answer questions along the way, and really allow people to share that feedback. We've also learned a lot about some of the challenges that we had with some of the connectivity with MedCity Mover. Some of that had to do with the signals, the technology we were using, working with the city of Rochester, who were fabulous partners, and working with us to ensure that things worked with on their system, helped us with troubleshooting and such. We had issues with GPS signals in the downtown environment. We've had other 8 CAV projects that we've been testing where we have issues with GPS signals, and it's kind of a little curious as to why we're having it. And there's never been necessarily a clear answer. We can kind of point to different things that might be causing it. But I think the bigger question is, how can we make improvements when we're seeing those issues? Some companies might just be looking at walking away and saying, well, this isn't going to be valuable or isn't going to work in this environment. And I think we just want to make sure we're addressing those issues, understanding what are some of the things we need to make sure that are successful, so that if we see these types of implementations become something that's more sustainable, that they're truly really benefiting people and can be used here in Minnesota and really everywhere.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you. Dave wanted to take a question from the audience. This one is from the University of Iowa, and I know that they are also doing a rural deployment project. They asked, how do you deal with freezing precipitation covering the sensors? Which I thought was a great question.
Yes. So if we look at the typical sensors that are being used for automated driving, it'll be cameras, LiDARs, and radars. So radars tend to be impervious to foul weather, which is great, but they have limitations in terms of resolution. The range is pretty good, but the resolution is highly limited. So it's very difficult to really classify an object. There's something in the way, but we're not sure if it's a pedestrian or something else. LiDAR provides higher resolution than a radar, but is, again, actively sending out a beam of light. And similarly with cameras, which is passive, taking light in, if that lens in front of either of those sensors are covered and no signals getting in, there's not a whole lot you can do. So you do need to have these, I'll call it safety modes, to really sense whether there's a degradation in signal, and then be able to effectively tell the vehicle to exit gracefully and safely as best as it can. That being said, there is the gray zone in the middle, which is a partially obscured lens where there is some signal coming through, and you can still resolve some information there. So this allows you to kind of have a curve of safety, if you will, to be able to sense that things are getting degraded, and then be able to effectively create a safe maneuver to pull over or try to find a safe spot to stop, etc. And more mechanically, there are things where there are lens cleaners, little nozzles and things like that that'll shoot cleaning fluid on there to keep that sensor or that lens area clean. So it's really a mix of the mechanical as well as the algorithmic to try to provide the best information for that vehicle to act on. But ultimately, the number one goal has to be a safe operation, and the faster you can understand the scenario or potentially avoid it, the better, obviously, it is for whether it's a shuttle, as Tara was talking about, or a 80,000-pound Class 8 truck driving down the highway. So all of these really have to rely on safety first.
Right,
Tara, just adding on to what Dave said, with our shuttles, our operators actually would hop off the vehicle on occasion when they were having issues with the sensors and take the microfiber cloth and clean them off. So sometimes just a good clean can help, but it's not necessarily the most practical in the long run either. So
Right.
I was going to say it's sort of the same issues that human drivers deal with when your windshield wipers aren't working because of the snow.
Yeah.
I guess we only have time for one last question, and because it's so near and dear to PAVE's heart, I wanted to ask Tara about what you've learned about public perception from these deployments. Have you seen that the public was eager to use them? Did you notice public opinion changing the longer the deployments were operating? Curious what you can.
Yeah, so first I'll note that on all of our projects, we try to do some survey information, whether it's for people riding it, people in the communities, just to gather that baseline knowledge. And we also did a survey back in 2020 within the state to kind of understand what the knowledge of CAV was and what their excitement or fear or concerns might be as well. So kind of compare everything to that, which has been really helpful. But if you read the media and some of the comments on media, you might get some mixed reactions. So I'll just put that out there. But what we hear on the surveys is really, I'd say, resoundingly positive. People maybe come in with limited information, limited knowledge and curiosity, and maybe a little skepticism, which I think is completely fair. And at the end, they come out with a little bit more understanding, feeling like maybe this is a good thing that we're testing here in the state, understand that it's not ready yet and understand what the limitations are. But I think the most exciting thing we hear from people is they see how this could be a technology that they could benefit from in the future, and they have the opportunity to help shape it. So I'd say that overall, we're hearing people are seeing this to be beneficial to have these types of deployments. Now, that doesn't mean we can go out and put a deployment in every city. It's not really feasible and things like that. But how are the ways that we can continue to expose people and get that experience? So anything we can do like that is, I think, something that's really valuable for not just our state, but probably everywhere around the country.
Fantastic. Well, on that note, unfortunately, our time is up, but thank you, Dave and Tara, both for joining us today for a really interesting conversation. And the video will be available on our YouTube channel and on the PAVEcast, and we'll try to answer as many of the questions we didn't get to on social media as well. Thank you all for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.